knight f3, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4. The players continue their debate on the Nimzo Indian defense. Previous matches where Karpov did not have a good record with it. He lost 3 games and drew 3 games. Of course, he must have prepared for this match specially. Knight f3, c5, g3, bishop g2, d5. Previous match Karpov has played knight e4. Let us go back and see. Bishop d2, bishop into c3, b into c3, Karpov castles, Kasparov also castles. f5. In this match on the 13th game, Karpov played 9th move, Karpov played knight a5, and in the 17th game. Let us go back and continue with the game. After d5, c into d5 is played, knight into d5, bishop d2, c into d4, knight into d4, knight into d4, knight into d5, bishop into d2, queen into d2, knight c6, knight f4, queen into d2 check, king into d2, bishop d7. White is slightly better in this, but black should be able to hold to a draw with the careful play. Rook hc1, king e7, knight d3, rook hc8, knight c5, rook a b8. b6 was simpler. If knight a6, rook d8, king e1, rook a c8. Or if knight into d7, or after b6, knight into d7, king into d7, rook c3, or instead of rook c3, b4, rook a b8, or after rook c3, rook c7, rook a c1, rook a c8 with equal chances. Let us go back and see the last move played by black is rook a b8. After rook a b8, white played rook c3, knight d8, rook a c1, bishop c6, knight d3, bishop d7, knight e5, rook into c3, rook into c3, bishop e8, b4. Very good. b4 is a very good move. a6. Black cannot push back the white pieces. f6. Let us go back and see. Instead of a6, if black plays f6, since knight d3, bishop c6, bishop into c6, knight into c6, b5. The rook enters the 7th rank. After the text, black is ready with f6. Therefore, a6 is played. Bishop e4, h6. Black misses the opportunity to change the pawn configuration in the center to suit his defensive equipments. Better was, let us go back and see. Better was f6, knight d3, f5, bishop f3, bishop c6, bishop into c6, or knight e5, king d6. Let us go back and see. After bishop into c6, knight into c6. So what is the last move played is h6. Let us go back to the game. a3, f6. Maxime Dugy, a grandmaster watching this game, has pointed out that a5. Let us go back and see what he says. Instead of f6, he suggests a6 would have easily equalized. For example, b into a, rook a8, rook c5, instead of rook c5, knight c4, bishop b5. Let us go back. After rook c5, king d6, knight d3, bishop c6. After the exchange of bishops, the black knight come to c6, and helps take the a5 pawn. Let us go back and see what is played after f6. Knight d3, bishop c6. It is necessary to prevent the rook from emerging on the 7th rack, but the exchange of bishops increases the black's difficulties. Bishop into c6, knight into c6, knight c5. Knight c5 is a good move because the knight returns to c5 with the threat of knight into a6. If rook a8, knight into b7. So knight c5 is a very good move. After knight c5, it was a very good move as indicated. Black played knight e5. Knight e5 is a dubious move. Why? Why he made knight e5? Because knight a7 loses to knight into a6 and knight d4. If knight d4 also loses to rook d3. Because of the check at d7. Probably black's best chance is a5. Let us go back and see. a5, after which neither rook d3, let us see, rook d3, knight e5, rook d4, a into b, etc. Or after a5, b5, knight d4, rook d3, b6, etc. Now let us go back and see what white played after knight e5. That was the last move played. f4, driving away the knight, e7, knight b3, king d6. Or instead of king d6, let us go back and see. f5, knight d4, king d6, rook d3, king e7, rook e3, etc. After king d6, let us go back and see what white plays. e4, g5, instead of g5, better was e5. Let us go back and see. Instead of g5, e5 is better. f5, b6, king d3, rook a8, knight d2, a5, But actually in the game, let us go back and see. After g5, king e3 is played. This is the second game of the World Championship held in 1986 between Kasparov and Karpov. Karpov playing black and Kasparov playing white. After king e3 by white, black played e5. F into g5 is played. F into g5. Knight a5, g4, rook c2, h5, rook c1, b6, rook c6 check, king e7, knight c4, rook f8, king e2, so that the rook's entry is avoided. Rook f3. Rook f3 is a bad move. There is no scope for the rook here. Knight e3. Better is a4. Knight f6. Rook into b6. Knight into c4. Rook into a6. Rook f2 check. King d3. Rook d6. Rook a7 check. King c6. Rook h7. e4. e4 is a nice move. King c3. Knight b5 check. Knight into a3 check is played. King d4. Rook into h2. Knight d5. h4. h4 is a good move. Rook into h4. Rook into h4. G into h4. g3. Knight f4. Knight c2. Check and draw a grid, because nobody can make a headway. So this game is also drawn. Each player is having 1 point. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your time. Please subscribe so that you can see all the 24 games. Thanks for watching once again.